Curriculum is common sense. This is my ECS 210 summary of learning. On the first day of class, we were asked, what is curriculum? I was really proud of the concise definition that my group created, a government-mandated document that provides teachers with the regulated and mandatory outcomes. Mike and Katya were very quick to show us that there's absolutely nothing concise about curriculum. We reflected on our experiences and that curriculum was a product when we were in the classroom. And while we were all clearly quite successful receiving the curriculum in this way, it was very evident that there was a lot more we needed to offer to our students as the teacher and the person in power. As we discussed the various ways that curriculum can be provided, I really strongly was motivated to learn how to do curriculum as a praxis. The education is not the filling of the bucket, but the lighting of the fire was a quote that really resonated with me when we were asked to blog, as well as Mike's example of the Tom collegiate students who got really engaged in what they were learning about the statement of apology and the TRC calls to action, and they took action, and they were being that change, and that is exactly what I want to be able to do to my students, and it's all in a matter of how you deliver that curriculum, and from the research and the discussions and the examples that Mike provided, it really made me realize that it's so important that we do curriculum as a practice in our classroom, and it's so beneficial to not just the teacher but the students, and because we're all going to be learning together, and that is where when the best learning happens, is when everybody is on that same page of learning. The hidden curriculum was a very important discussion as well. It is so important that we are aware of those hidden values and beliefs and the reactions, because that is going to form how our students think. Upon reflecting on the hidden curriculum I received, I realized that it was in the classroom where I learned a lot of the gender roles and the racial profiling, and it was somewhat embarrassing to acknowledge that, but important because now I can be mindful that I'm really affecting people when I send the boys to go help move furniture and the girls to go help cook in the kitchen. It is very important that I provide that sense of belonging and identity to every single student, and that it is my hidden curriculum that will hinder that. And while it seems overwhelming that I have to now think about my hidden curriculum and the formal document and how I'm providing it, it is all very, very important, but I really feel that the hidden curriculum is where it is most detrimental when you're focusing on building that relationship to ensure that the curriculum is even being reached by those students. I can't discuss hidden curriculum without quickly reflecting on when Mike pointed out to all of us that we were all racist. While it wasn't a shock to me, it was a shock to several people that were sitting around me, and it was good. And I'm really thankful that happened, because resistance happens if there's learning, and if there's no resistance, there's no learning. And that day we saw a lot of resistance, but then we saw definitely 100% of the students in that classroom finally starting to learn if they hadn't been learning prior to February 29th. So I'm really thankful for the wake-up call, and I think that so much growth happened after that class by simply being called out on something that none of us really want to admit that we are. Now, on the same note, we discussed what the good student was. It was all of us when we were in school 10 years ago, that middle-class white privileged student, discussing what the good student was and how that's not what we really want to focus on was really important, and that we have to look past labels and whatever's in the cume, not necessarily ignore it, but don't be focused on that, because every single student in that classroom has an ability and has a unique trait that is going to be beneficial for the classroom. So reading and identifying the common sense version of a good student and realizing everybody is a good student, you just need to figure that out as the teacher, was mind-blowing for me, and I was really thankful for that eye-opening the eye-opening readings in Kumashiro's book, and just acknowledging the importance of realizing that you need to look past that middle-class white privileged student who always has her hand up in the air, because that student in the back who hasn't had breakfast yet, once he gets a piece of toast in him, he could probably provide just as good of an answer as that girl in the front. We learned about literacy and the different types of literacy, and again, this was really profound for me. I never acknowledged all the different types of literacy, and when I started to reflect, I realized that, I am literate in more ways than one, but because of how I was raised, I wasn't really able to flourish in the other areas. And it made me realize that just because my student isn't literate in that common sense way, they might have that musical literacy or emotional literacy or social literacy, and it's important to acknowledge that and differentiate how I'm providing that curriculum and teaching to that student and the lesson plans I'm creating, to ensure that just because he can't write a response, maybe he could perform a response. And I just appreciated the wake-up call to realizing that just because my student can't read and write does not mean that he's illiterate, and try to find that other literacy the student has, so that I can definitely promote the confidence and ensure that every student flourishes in whichever way he or she may be literate. In discussing teaching styles, we realize that it's really just all an act. I know Mike said that several times. Entering the thought of education and teaching, we realized that it was a political act, and how the dominant group is always going to have the control over the rest of us. And you start to look at the curriculum, and when we critique the curriculum, you realize the politicians' hidden curriculum is written in that curriculum, and it felt a little defeating until Mike pointed out those indicators are written in sand. So that gives you a little bit more freedom, and it was definitely a glimmer of hope when sometimes you can just feel like so bogged down by everything that's going on with the curriculum and with the education sector, to know that I have a little bit more control now, and I can just find my own little patch of sand to write my indicators in. It's really relieving, especially when we get to discussing treaty ed, which was a very central focus of the class, and it's extremely important and definitely more than an outcome. And I really appreciated how Mike continuously emphasized the importance that it's an integration of the treaty ed. It's not just meeting those 4 outcomes for your grade level you're teaching at, but integrating it all. And when I thought about teaching treaty ed and having those First Nation students and being that white teacher at the front of the room, I thought, how am I going to reach these people that have all these intergenerational effects? And I wrote a really personal reflection, and it made me realize that though I'll never identify with the intergenerational effects of the residential schools or the cultural genocide that they endured, I can identify with trauma. And I think that it really allows me to form a relationship with the students and with the families, and let them realize that I am an ally here, and there's more to me than what you're seeing, just as there's more to everybody and every student in my classroom and every family that comes through my door. And I was really thankful for acknowledging how, the trauma that I endured in the past is not the baggage that I always defined it as. And now sitting here in university looking forward to becoming a teacher, it's now fuel to my fire, and it's been a blessing to be able to flip what that trauma really means to me in my life. I appreciated all the critique that we received as we taught. Mike always emphasized how teaching is so big and that we can take lessons anywhere, and we did that really great reading about how curriculum is a place, and we had a few lesson plans that took us outside and all around, and the use of technology. And curriculum is so important when you think about it as a place, and how where we teach completely changes how that outcome is reached and how each student learns. Um, and I really enjoyed how Mike always emphasized how important our words were. In script, you might think you're being over prepared, but it's so important to always script and be mindful and be aware and promote positive discussions and that deep engagement in our students. And I was really appreciative of being able to see the huge variety of ways that everybody in our seminar viewed teaching. And I definitely got a lot of really great ideas. And each group was definitely a tough act to follow, but it just inspired me and reminded me that every time I step foot in front of my classroom, I want to ensure that I am that tough act to follow as a teacher, and that I resonate with my students and they always think about me and remember how awesome I was. That's my goal. So in the end, we learned a lot, and I'm really thankful, and thank you so much, Mike and Katya, for really opening our eyes to how vast curriculum really is. Um, it was a really personal learning experience for me, and I acknowledged a lot of things that I've struggled with for a really long time. So thank you very much for providing the teachings that you did to help me really grow personally, emotionally, and professionally. I look forward to learning from you all again in September.